I want to remind everybody that we tend to forget in there's Serge Cruz from Nick is here with us next to the airport, and Serge Cruz is from Asheville, where it is also freezing. I want to say a few words about the use of story. You know, we tend to forget all the time that the role of the story and storytelling and story writing was very, very different 2,000 years ago than often what happens today. Most story writers and tellers did not expect the story to be taken literally. A story was an attempt to put into words something that you can't put into words many, many times. A feeling, an expression, something that's happened to you. And so you're trying to make a point. The object is you can be faithfully true or experientially true, but not literally true. I think most writers in antiquity would be shocked to think that what they wrote was being taken literally. But this seems to be a problem with our species and in every religion, where people get creative and they realize that words have limitations. And so they use the story as an art form to get us in a non-literal way to try to express things. And I'll be doggone, in every religion, you get those who are going to take stuff literally, not the intent, which is to say that when we look at the stories at Christmas time, in our tradition here, nobody ever expected them to be taken literally, and they are not an attempt to beat everybody over the head with doctrines and dogmas that the authors had no idea about whatsoever. A classic example, in classic Christianity, everybody's heard of original sin. I bet most Christians never knew that the idea of original sin didn't even become an issue till the 4th century. Yes, 300 years after Jesus died, Augustine of Hippo in North Africa came up with the idea. Jesus would have never known what he was talking about. So I'm just saying, when we look at the Christmas stories, remember to look through them, not take them literally, and let your mind wonder, what was this person experiencing? What kind of awe, what kind of wow, what was going on in their minds? Remember, this is not about dogma or doctrine. It's about how do we listen to the various ways people in antiquity tried to explain things as they saw it, using the inadequacy of words. Christmas Eve, lessons and carols. If anybody's going to be with us Christmas Eve, we're going to be at both Zoom and at Aureli's. Nick has down here, read Between the Lions. Yes, that's a good one. If you want to read on Christmas Eve, let me know. We've got some openings for Christmas Eve, just like we do here. And finally, one of the things we want to do in 2025 is extend pastoral care. And we're going to talk more about that as we begin the new year, how to use Zoom, the phone, and texting to connect with more people all the time who are going through rough times, just needing to say hello. And so I just share that with you as some things we look forward to. As we begin now, let us have some special music. Remembering today, by the way, is the beginning of the 25th, rather, Christmas. Oh, I should mention that, by the way. I hope everybody knows that Christians did not celebrate Christianity till 200 and some years after Jesus lived and died. Christmas was not on the calendar. Easter was, because of Passover, but the celebration of Christmas itself, the first, only one we're aware of that was early, was in 240. It wasn't until 320 the Christians, yes, 320, the Christians began to organize Christmas services, just so you know that. So to remind us of our Jewish heritage and our Jewish roots in Christianity, we have the very, very famous Oseh Shalom. That was our Grant Santelier, who's a senior in high school. Grant is on the way with his family. They left at 7 a.m. this morning. They recorded that yesterday afternoon. Lovely recording in their home. Joining us this morning, again, Gail and Tom from Port Orange, and Cindy and Larry from Port Orange as well. So one more time, we welcome Digit doing tech in Oldsmar, John and Christine from Port Orange, Mary Haystack Grimmy from also Oldsmar, Alan and Edward, who are still in Miami. Naki is here from Georgia and recovering day by day from a serious operation. Bobby Vance is from Kissimmee. Rowena has been with us from almost the beginning. Her son certainly has, and she'll be doing a moment later, an introduction to the menorah. We've got Pat Sullivan from Forest Hills, Danny Sorkin from Forest Hills and Queens, Maureen from down in Farm Country, Barbara Young. Her husband was my first chair at Miami-Dade College, and I've known Barbara for a very long time, and she's in South Miami. Nick is over near the airport. Serge is in Asheville. Gail and Tom again are in Port Orange, as are Cindy and Larry. Introducing us to our Jewish heritage. We forget that Jesus was born Jewish, lived Jewish, and died Jewish. And somehow in the traditions that gets lost and forgotten. A very, very famous introduction to worship and Jewish thought, Oseh Shalom by Ozzy Schwartz and Shira Lissack. If you would, Grimmy. All Souls is blessed to have many, many Jewish members with us and part of us. And one of our founders was the son of Rowena, Ian. And Rowena has been with us almost from the beginning. She represents Reconstruction background and has always done something interesting at this time of the year. Hanukkah begins the sundown the 25th. So I asked her if she would at least give us a quick introduction to Hanukkah and the menorah one more time. So are you ready, Rowena? And you have to unmute. Rowena, you have to unmute. There
Okay.
you go.
Okay. All right. Where is it? All right. Can you see me? I can't see me. Where am I?
We can see you.
Right there where you need to be. Go right ahead.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. So, I just wanted to get something. All right. So I am an ADD adult, and so this is me doing my thing. So, Hanukkah, what is it? It's a spin, God bless the weather, it's a bit less of a spin because some of Hanukkah is correct. And what I'm actually going to do is go through the story and then do all the other stuff about how we celebrate Hanukkah. So Hanukkah is based on the fact that the Baghdad king from Greece invaded Jerusalem, and the small party of rebels, kind of like Star Wars, fought back and kept fighting against them and finally won. And then they realized that the temple had run out of oil and they sent somebody out, and they had a little bit of oil, lasted 7 days and 7 nights. It was a miracle. So that's a miracle of Hanukkah, but there's a lot more to it than the kids get taught nowadays. So the miracle of the lights is the fact that the oil lasted for 7 days, but we also put our menorah, which you'll see in a minute, in the window to show the world that the light of Judaism still shines, and we use it as a guide for everyone, hopefully, in the world. Okay, so that's what you learn in Hanukkah. Though also, because we have oil, I'm just going to wing it. We fry foods in oil, like latkes, which are potato pancakes, and donuts, which are like bready things. And we all cook them in oil because it has to do with the oil in the temple. It's a bit of a fast stretch, but what are you going to do? Okay, also, let me see. Because we've got so close to Christmas, we get presents, but we never used to do that. Oh yes, dreidels. A dreidel. Where are we? Okay. Okay, dreidel. Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you see what I'm showing you?
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So, dreidel in English means to turn semi-on it's near it. So it's actually a top. And the reason I call it dreidel is because the kids and the young men used to use it to fool the guards in Jerusalem while they were being invaded.
I,
Thinking that,
you're fading out, Rowena. You're fading out.
how's this? Is this better?
Yeah, better, better.
Okay. They to think them into playing a game. Actually, it was a way to pray while they were playing. So the letters are Hebrew, but what they mean is Nes is none, Gadol is Z, Haya is.
Rowena, we're not hearing you. You need to speak directly in the mic.
Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I'm going to bring it. Okay, so this was their way of praying while the gods thought they were playing, and they also use the gelt, which is the gold coins, and you can play that at Hanukkah and go Google it. Then also we've got, oh, we've done that. Okay. Then we also have, oh, look at that. Okay. Okay, so dreidels were also used in the Middle Ages when Jews were also forbidden to study Torah. So now, but let's get on with the story. You can Google Hanukkah for the other stuff, but I was researching the story of Hanukkah, and it's really interesting. It's a lot more interesting than what we do on Hanukkah. So what happened, if I could see it, was you caught me by surprise. Can you hear me now?
Yes, just like the menorah for us.
Oh, here you go, menorah. Can you see the menorah?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, so the menorah, these should come out. The menorah is, we light one candle per night. This is the candle that we use to light the other candles, so the other candles, which are holy, don't have to do the work. It's this candle here. All of these come out. And so each night you put another candle in, and then you take this candle from the gas oven or whatever, and you light this one, and then the next night you light this one, and so on and so forth until Hanukkah is over. So there's two different types of menorah. Go Google it, it's good for something to do. And that's the menorah. And I just finished it off last night. This is actually a menorah which my daughter and I did 15, 20 years ago when she was in Torah school, about 14 years old. And it's based on a book called The Nine Spoons. And the story is a real story from some women who were in the Holocaust. They were in a Auschwitz, and Hanukkah was coming up, and what they did was they hid spoons. They stole spoons, and they found enough spoons to make a menorah. And here you see the spoons that we used. It was kind of a family project, and that's how they celebrated Hanukkah in the middle of the Holocaust in a concentration camp. So that's really cool. How am I on time? Am I out of time?
Yep, you're out of time, but that was very cool. We never knew about that with the menorah in the Holocaust. Thank you for that.
All right, you're welcome.
All righty, thank you.
By the way, go out and Google King Antiochus IV. He was absolutely ridiculous, but he's really interesting, and it's worth a good Google.
Thank you, Rowena. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. As we get into the service proper, George Fox University. If you'd be so kind to join with me in the responsive call to worship based upon the book of the prophet Isaiah, asking you to greet the heavy green. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. And for those who wish to read the morning prayer with me, may this Christmas we light candles of joy despite all sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles for courage, for fear ever present, candles of peace for tempest-tossed days, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire all living, and may their light shine all the year long. Amen. Our first reading was supposed to be read by Felix, and he's not here, so we're going to ask Danny Sorkin to read the first reading by Rachel Marie Martin. Grimmy, if you pull it up for us and let Danny go forward.
Okay, folks, bear with me. This is an unrehearsed performance. Don't give up on this year. Keep fighting for the good. Keep showing up. Keep loving. Keep giving back. Keep being kind. Keep showing grace. Keep caring. Keep trying new things. Keep on. The world needs you to believe in the good.
The responsive reading is an old reading from Van Dyke, but I think the words are just absolutely magnificent. And I'll ask you to read the words in green as a response. That'll be followed by a two shot from Bobby Vance, who will explain some Kwanza and then read a reading from Luke. First, our responsive reading. There is a better thing than the observance of Christmas Day, and that is keeping Christmas. Are you willing to close your book of complaints against the management of the universe and look around you for a place where you can sow a few seeds of happiness? Are you willing to believe that love is the strongest thing in the world? Stronger than hate, stronger than evil, stronger than death. And that the blessed life which began in Bethlehem 1900 years ago is the image and brightness of the eternal love. Then you can keep Christmas, and if you can keep it for a day, why not always? And Bobby Vance on Kwanzaa.
Good morning, everyone. In the interest of time, and I see time is moving, you're fortunate that I didn't plan to really give you a deep dive into the technicalities of Kwanzaa. If everybody can hear me and get close to your screen, because I'm really not supposed to say this, but I'm going to tell you really the reality of Kwanzaa versus the textbook Kwanzaa, shall we say. Kwanzaa is a 7-day harvest festival that nobody observes because in America, we don't have harvest, except for, I'd say, in certain rural areas. But generally, the idea of Kwanzaa in 1966 was to make up everything that African Americans had been missing from the time they set foot on this country from the first slave ship, which is basically no history, no customs. You don't know where you came from. You can't speak your language. Everything was stripped from you. So the creator of Kwanzaa felt that he was going to try to put everything back in that was missing. So you see, to me, signs of Hanukkah with we have a Kanara, we have candles, we're supposed to light them. We have, and anybody, as Rowena could say, you really have to Google this to see the technicalities of Kwanzaa. But Kwanzaa, unlike Hanukkah, Kwanzaa was not tied to a religion. So we have no priest. We have nobody to enforce the customs that were set out. So, as Black people have done in America since we first set foot here, we improvised. I remember in the 1980s, my wife and I, when we first heard about Kwanzaa, and it took us that long to hear about Kwanzaa. We got a Kanara, we got the candles, we got the book to see what we were supposed to do. And then it said we were supposed to get the family together. So we tried to get the kids together, but this one had football practice, and my wife had to work overtime, and I was coming back from work. And you know what? Kwanzaa doesn't work in the American system of living. It could work in Africa, but not in America. So, what we did, just like when we were given food that was the leftovers, we didn't get the ham and bacon, we got the slop basically, and we turned it into soul food.
Ah.
So, Kwanzaa, we take the best of Kwanzaa and we call it the spirit of Kwanzaa. And we observe and celebrate that every year. Where I live in my community, we actually have a festival on the seventh day of Kwanzaa because we have a ballroom and we have thousands of people that live in the community. It's a perfect place to do it. But generally, you'll find Kwanzaa observed in cities, Maureen, New York, and places like that, community centers, Black churches, government offices, Kwanzaa festivals, Kwanzaa observances are usually held like that. And they always involve music, food, drumming, because the key is Kwanzaa is the spirit of not being ashamed of your past.
Mm.
Not being ashamed of your past. I was a child in the 60s, and I remember after the Saturday morning cartoons in the afternoon, there came two of my favorite shows. One was Jungle Jim, and the other was Rama of the Jungle.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And just loved those pith helmets, and they just looked so good. But you have to realize that that was basically what I was introduced to of Africa.
Ah,
And Africans were of two classes that I learned. Class number one were the guys who held the stuff on their head for Jungle Jim. They didn't say much. They just shimmied their way through the jungle with the stuff on top of their head. But then there were the other guys. I never forget my brothers and their sisters. We called them hooga boogers. And the reason we called them hooga boogers, because every Saturday we'd watch Jungle Jim walk through that narrow path in the jungle, and we'd be like, "Oh, Jim, you know there's hooga boogers in those bushes." And you know what? Every Saturday they jumped out with shields and spears. And they said, "Hooga booga, hooga booga, hooga booga, hooga booga." That's all I heard them say. And of course, Jungle Jim, just like he was in the arcade, he just popped them off. And that was that. That was my view of Africa and Africans.
wow.
And my friends, we used to have a saying amongst ourselves until I learned better. And we said, I am so glad my ancestors were slow, because if they were fast, they may not have got caught. They may not have got on the slave ship and brought my ancestors to America, this wonderful country. And I may be, guess what? I may have been stuck back in Africa with the hooga boogers. So thank God for the slow runners. And you think about the mentality that puts when you grow up. And then in the 60s, when there's the riots and people are burning and they're tearing up the city and it's so much whatever. Kwanzaa is just an attempt to make people feel that you're not less than, that you do have a history that's sometimes good, sometimes bad, but Africa is a magnificent place, not just a place of safaris and animals and diamonds, but magnificent civilizations, magnificent achievements, really something that as you learn about, you could be proud of. And I'll just stop at that because I can go on and on and on, and time is escaping. But I just like what to say and ask everybody in the spirit of Kwanzaa this year. I like everybody that can and that has Netflix to watch the Netflix movie, The 6888. It's a story of World War II and the only Black female regiment that went overseas. They didn't fight. They did the mail, but it's an incredible story. Do that for Kwanzaa this year. Thank you.
Okay. And Bobby, you're not going away yet. You've got a reading.
Oh, oh, Kenneth. Okay.
There you go. Bobby Vance, number 2.
Reading the Gospel of Luke 4:16 through 20. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him.
A couple of things before we begin. The reality is people are going to believe what they want to believe. That's the way it is. And number 2, all religions seem to be, maybe I shouldn't say all, most religions seem to be plagued by those who really don't want to deal with the realities of the beginnings of the religion. It's unseemly, Reverend, is what it is. It's unseemly, is what it is. Buddhists have this problem, by the way. I don't know if you know much about Buddhism, but Siddhartha decided to leave it all in Nepal at the age of 29 or 30. 29 or 30, 2,400 years ago was not like it is 29 today. 29 or 30, 2,400 years ago meant you were late middle-aged and you were older, much older. Yet if you take a look at all the statues of Siddhartha, what do you see? Do you see an old male or a middle-aged male? No. To make matters worse, Siddhartha hikes himself down to India, and he decides to renounce all that he was, including his wife and child, by the way. Nobody likes to talk about that one either. And he decides to become a renunciate and live only on what people give him. So for 5 years, he wandered around the Ganges plain with a begging bowl until he looked skeletal. Finally passes out from malnutrition. Yet what do you see with all the statues of Siddhartha? A young, strapping man, a manly man from the gym, big shoulders, big solid body, pure face, young face. Where did this come from? Siddhartha no more looked like that in the man. There seems to be within religion the inability to deal with the realities as they were on the ground. That brings us to this morning. We have read in many, many churches, and I can't do the voice. I looked this up. In the 1950s, there were certain narrators that were schooled in a combination of English, BBC English, and non-identifiable East Coast American English. And you came out with this voice that had gravitas. It wasn't quite God, but it was more than an angel. And in those days it came to pass that a decree went out from Centurion. Yes, Maureen. And in those days it came to pass that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be enrolled. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, people would hear this and they would actually think that what Luke wrote actually happened. Much to everybody's annoyance, it turns out that what Luke wrote never happened. There was no enrollment. There was no census at all worldwide during the reign of Caesar Augustus. Well, this annoys a lot of people. And then you get the fact in that great statement that he writes, and so it was accomplished when they were there that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. Now, I know if we were going to be in another church, I would probably have members of the elders or the board of trustees or deacons say to me afterwards, Reverend, that was unseemly. You shouldn't all talk about that like that. It's not nice. I said, well, let's talk about the manger. Has anybody ever really thought of what it means to be putting a baby in a manger? Where is she? Grimmy, Haystack Grimmy, you've been around cows. Do cows and pigs and sheep smell delightful? Is there a certain natural odor to cows and sheep? And guess what? Nobody cleans up after them every 5 minutes. So you're in a manger with flies and all kinds of whatnot, with cows and sheep and pigs, and it doesn't smell nice. And I could hear some deacon saying, why did y'all have to say that, Reverend? Because it's true, that's why. We can't sanitize the way the story said. Why do you wish to sanitize? We have this way of talking about Jesus that absolutely fascinates me. Many of you don't know the hymn. If you do, I'm embarrassed. There was a famous hymn written in the early 1900s. Do any of you know this? In the Garden. This sanitization of Jesus is absolutely amazing. Let me read to you some lyrics from this. George Beverly Shea of the famous Billy Graham Crusades would sing this in his voice. I come to the garden alone. I come to the garden alone. While the dew is still on the roses. Let's remind everybody, where are you going to find a rose garden in the Galilee? When you're talking about poor village and you're talking about a carpenter, please? While the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. Now listen to the following words. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy we share, how erotic is this? And the joy we share as we tarry there, oh, none other has ever known. I'm trying to imagine Jesus, a middle to middle-aged 30-year-old who has worked with his father in a carpentry shop in a poor, dirt poor village, which means at the age of 6, 7, or 8, he's going to be working with his hands, with wood and stone. Have you ever seen some pictures of Jesus and you look at him and you say, why would he be wearing a white robe as a carpenter? Why would he have hands that look like they've never touched anything? Well, what is this Jesus? Anybody ever hear of this Jesus? He would be wearing a kind of dark oatmeal, rough wool garment. He would have had calluses on his hands. He would have had skin that is brown. God help us, brown skin. He would have had hair that is African-ish hair. He would not have been raised in northern Germany or a Knight of the Round Table. We somehow say, we want to talk about Jesus. Talk about Jesus, Reverend. Well, I want to talk to you about Jesus. You want to talk about a manger? Let's talk about a manger. You want to talk about poor? Let's talk about poor, and let's talk about Mary. I read a verse, a poem from a woman, which I am sure would get me fired in most of the Christian churches today if we read this on this Sunday, the fourth Sunday in Advent. Sometimes I wonder, she writes, if Mary breastfed Jesus. Well, of course she did. How do you think they did? They did feeding back then, unless they had a wet nurse. That's what you did, folks. You didn't have bottles. And by the way, did you all know that Pampers are only 63 years old? I don't know what people think about when they think about babies. I have a whole bunch of people around here that have babies. I say to the parents, how are you doing? Are you exhausted? They said, you know, you're the only one who gets it. Why is it somebody your age gets it? People go, oh, what a cute little baby. They said, they forget what it's like to be raising a baby when the baby gets up at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, poops all the time, whizzes all the time, and gets very angry and cries. Remember that famous phrase, we are born naked, wet, and hungry, and then things get worse. People tend to forget that. So this lady writes this poem. Her name is Caitlin Shelter, and this is what she writes. Sometimes I wonder if Mary breastfed Jesus, if she cried out when he bit her, or if she sobbed when he would not latch. This is the real world, folks. This is the real world. And sometimes I wonder if this is all too vulgar to ask in a church full of men without milk stains on their shirts or coconut oil on their breasts, preaching from pulpits off limits to the Mother of God. But then I think of feeding Jesus, birthing Jesus, the expulsion of blood, the smell of sweat, the salt of a mother's tears onto the soft head of the salt of the earth. That mother feeling lonely and tired and hungry, annoyed, overwhelmed, loving. And I think if the vulgarity of birth is not honestly preached by men who carry power, but not burden. Listen to that phrase. By men who carry power, but not burden, who carry privilege, but not labor, who carry authority, but not submission, then it should not be preached at all. Because the real scandal of the birth of God lies in cracked nipples of a 14-year-old and not in the sermons of ministers who say women are too delicate to lead. Bless that woman. You know, writing in 1932, a person I never heard of, and this is embarrassing, wrote the following. Jesus knew nothing of the dogmas of Christian creeds. It's true, folks, it's true. The fall of man, the inheritance of sin, damnation as a punishment for sin, the incarnation, the atonement, salvation, and redemption, and would have not understood their meaning or even recognized their words. It cannot be emphasized too often that Jesus was not a theologian. He interpreted religion as something not primarily to be believed, but to be lived. But to be lived. Notice that reading that we had read to us this morning when when Bobby Vance read, he picked up a scroll and said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor." Notice the words that he reads are not about power, not about telling everybody what to do, not about screaming and yelling, but talking about bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, until the let of the oppressed go free. You know, this time of the year, we want to be talking about mangers and farm animals and sweat and women dying in childbirth. Right now in Afghanistan, all women give birth at home, and 1 in 8 women in 2024, 1 in 8 died in Afghanistan giving childbirth. The same as it was 2,000 years ago when Mary gave birth, probably in Nazareth, not Bethlehem, but she gave birth. I know right now people are been very confused and upset because of where the direction of the country may or may not be going. Rather than talking about sweet Jesus, or thinking of pictures of a Jesus that didn't physically exist, or thinking, and he walked with me, and he talked with me, and he told me I am his own. Oh, I think we ought to be celebrating the sense of a man, a simple man born of peasant women, peasant parents, and peasant background, who came and tried to be good and kind and loving. And he did things that I bet you're not going to hear from pulpits anywhere. I love it when they say to me, "You need to preach the Bible, Reverend. You need to know the Word of God." Well, I'll read you some of the Word of God before I leave today. And I bet you don't hear this from pulpits. Let me read to you from the Gospel of John. The background of this is it was added to John's Gospel. Why? Because the story of what happened was widely known and it was felt it could not go past. This is the sweet Jesus? No, this is a Jesus, not an interesting dogma or doctrine, but how do you live? The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to him, Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery." Oh, the puffed up breasts, the holier than thou attitude. Now, in the law of Moses, he commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? Oh, you can just see it. You can feel it, the audacity, the empowerment. You can just sense it. It oozes. They said this to test him, saying they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin, let anyone among you who is without sin, let you cast the first stone." You, without sin, you cast the first stone. And once again, he bent down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with this woman standing before him. You can imagine that woman was humiliated, embarrassed, thinking all the things, and just having been addressed by these powerful men, puffed up. Don't you love it when people get full of righteous self-indignation, judging them all? Yes, I know the word of Moses, or. And Jesus said to her, Where are they? Where are they? Has no one condemned you? And she said, no one, sir, no one. And Jesus said, then neither do I condemn you. Go your way and sin no more. That's the Jesus I want to hear about. The Jesus I want to know. The Jesus that speaks to everybody. Women, tax collectors, Samaritan at the well, publicans and sinners. That means you and me. Rachel Marie Martin had a great quote. Reminds me of what Jesus did. So I read it to you as my wish as we look at the new year. Don't give up on this year. Keep fighting for the good. Keep showing up. Keep loving. Keep giving back. Keep being kind. Keep being brave. Keep caring. Keep trying new things. Keep showing grace. Keep on. The world needs you to believe in the good. And we had a good example. Amen. We share at All Souls a very, very common meal. The earliest followers of Jesus called it agape, kind of a love meal. Simple bread, a simple cup, a very, very Jewish tradition that started way, way millennia ago as a way to offer welcome and thanksgiving. Simple bread, a simple cup. Jesus was criticized regularly for offering bread and cup to publicans and sinners. I love those phrases, publicans and sinners. And everybody says, what does that mean? I said, look in the mirror. That's us. Publicans, sinners, the whole bunch. People who sometimes don't belong, sometimes don't fit in. I don't know, the publicans, riffraff, sinners, all of us. Sinners meaning we don't always try to do the right thing. So on this season, symbolically celebrating a birth, once again, we offer bread to one and all and a cup of love and friendship and affirmation, an affirmation of who you are and what you are. And we always turn to our theologian, Winnie the Pooh, for some guiding words. And if Donald will pull them up, let us read them together. Let us read together, one and all. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, and light for the way. I wrote personally the final prayer because I thought it was a way of being an inclusive prayer of what the many thoughts we have at this time of the season. And for those of you who wish, I would ask you to read this prayer with me. And Donald, if you would pull it up. An inclusive prayer, if you would, those who wish, read it with me together. And now, in this most special of seasons, may that power stronger than the brightest star, and yet found in the most common and humble of births. Nurture, heal, transform, and guide us all our days. Amen. Thank you very, very much for being with us this morning, John and Chris, Mary, Rowena, Danny, Pat Sullivan, Naki, Bobby Vance, Nick, Maureen, Barbara Young, Serge, Cindy and Larry, Sarah. Sarah is Nick's mom, Alan and Eddie, Pat Can Care, Nikki Lindquist. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Remember, we have Christmas Eve in person and online. If you'd like to read, let me know. And Bobby Vance is preaching in the beginning of February. Yes. So blessings all. Hopefully I'll see some of you Christmas Eve. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us today. Thank you. Bye-bye now.